process governance should provide liberty to be able to react to business changes and evolving landscapes, but it also should have control to be able to measure and make sure the right KPIs are placed.
Welcome to Process Pioneers, the show that takes a deep dive into the minds of decision makers, key influencers, and process experts who are pioneering the world of everything process.
Welcome to another episode of Process Pioneers. Today I have the absolute privilege of sitting down with Mitushi Chowdhury. She is a business process specialist from the Department of Natural Resources, Mines and Energy here in Queensland. Now, Mitushi has an extensive background and history working with some of Australia's largest organisations, including BHP, Suncorp, Telstra, Rio Tinto, even Virgin Australia. And so I'm really excited for this interview today to talk with Mitushi and get, I guess, that understanding from the various organisations that she has worked with. But Mitushi, I guess as we get started, I might pass the ball to you to give us a little bit more of a comprehensive background of who you are, and just so the people listening right now can get an understanding of when you're responding to some of these questions, where that experience is coming from. And I guess to be more specific, where did that initial interest in processes, business processes, come from? And then I guess a little bit of a timeline from how you got started to where you are today.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me, Daniel. I really appreciate it. It's really exciting to be a part of this journey, and I'm looking forward to the next 30 minutes. As you've already mentioned, I've been a part of, had the opportunity to work with a fair few large organizations, and they all have helped me learn a fair few different things along the way. So I have been in a lot of these organizations as business analyst, and as you know, the job of a business analyst is by and large to capture requirements for a new system that's going to be implemented. But as with anything, technology is only an enabler for the business. So as a business analyst, I always made it a point to understand what the business does and how they go about it, which is where the process element came into the picture before I embarked on the journey to gather requirements. So that was always my first port of call. And then a few years ago, when I was at Suncorp, one of my teammates, extended teammates, really pushed me and encouraged me to get my Six Sigma green belts.
Right.
He pushed me for black belt, but I did the green belt. So I went for the ASQ1, and that was quite rigorous. And when I was going and preparing for the exam for that, I realized that I naturally operate in that way anyway. That's how things come to me. So I realized that it's a natural inclination that I have, and that's where it kind of started my journey.
Great. That's so good. So I guess for those that are listening right now that maybe they're within an organization that doesn't have a very, mature BPM framework, they're not so familiar with process management. I know there are some very large organizations out there that it's not really part of their focus. All of their processes are in the minds of their stakeholders. But how would you, for that person that's listening that wants to understand BPM a little bit more, how would you define business process management? Obviously, there are quite a number of definitions and descriptions out there, but talk to us about what BPM is to you.
BPM, in very simple terms, is the way an organization creates and maintains its processes and then analyzes it to look for areas of improvement and optimize it to make it a more well-oiled machine, so to speak. So you may have, say, an organization with 5 departments, and each of those 5 departments need to work together to produce a product, the end product. But they may have certain underpinning core processes of their own. Now, what BPM is meant to do is take a step back and not only look at the processes individually, but also in combination with each other as a totality. And as a result of that, you may find that there are areas of improvement where there are redundancies because they've been done like that forever and it's been handed down. Or there is not enough transparency. And those are the things that BPM brings to fore, trying to take an enterprise-wide view and then working on it little by little.
Yeah, okay, great. And so who should, within an organization, who should care about BPM? Who should care about the business processes? And whose responsibility does that fall in?
So BPM is one of those things which will impact in some way, shape or form, everybody, right? So it is not a person's responsibility. It needs buy-in from everybody. And it has to start right from the top and trickle down. Who should care about it? Any business that wants to deliver excellent and consistent products and services, good customer experience in the most cost-effective way. That's when somebody would care about BPM. And it sounds like a no-brainer, everybody should, but it is not as straightforward as we would like to believe. Because like I said, BPM can be a little disruptive because it instigates change in an organization, and that's where resistance comes in. And it also means an appetite for investment because you have to then bring on dedicated people who know what they're doing to help you on that journey as well.
Great. And so let's talk a little bit about that further, that resistance, I guess, because there could be someone listening right now that they're within an organization where they can start to see the value in, look, guys, we need to document and manage and improve our processes. But obviously they need to get buy-in from the senior management, from the exec level, from the CXOs. What sort of you said it seems like a no-brainer or common sense, like the value in it, but what are the potential objections or resistance that could arise? Obviously you mentioned then about they're being changed, it being quite disruptive or potentially disruptive, and obviously there's a cost involved there. But let's talk about the resistance and potential objections that someone might find when trying to really drive that within their organization.
Sure. I'll just talk on the basis of some of the things that I have seen. So there's one example where people might be entrenched in their ways. They've been doing something 20, 30 years. It works just fine. You know, you are trudging along. Why change something that's not broken? Why bother? Certain people who've been too long in the workforce, it's not about being on the cutting edge for them. It's about, we're comfortable in this little box. We've been doing this forever and you want us to change. Why? So that's one. And the other example could potentially be, this is more in the technology space, where you have a part of the workforce that is specialized in a little more outdated and legacy systems. And those systems are not in use anymore. A lot of them are going out of support. They need to be decommissioned. They are a risk to the organization, but that's the skill set that they have. And they feel uncomfortable knowing that that will not be required anymore. So it means that they'll have to almost re-engineer their skill sets to ramp up on something else.
Right.
It's something new, and not many people are very comfortable with learning something very, very new after they've been in the workforce for 30, 40 years.
Right, right.
So those are the kinds of examples of changes, resistance that I have noticed. There may be other instances, but these are by and large some of the categories I have noticed.
Right, right.
How to deal with them? Like I said, it's a very big change management exercise, and you need people who have engaged at the top level. And you have to work through the areas where the resistance is going to come, and you almost have to understand why that resistance is going to be and address it. And in a tactful way, right? So it's a whole ADKAR journey, like they say in change management. Create awareness, create desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement as to why this change needs to happen, and it's in your best interest to come on board. Right,
right. So, I mean, in some organizations, they're looking at BPM from a project to project basis. And then you've obviously got organizations that have a framework for enterprise-wide. Would you consider BPM to be a strategic tool? Because I guess that's what that CXO level are looking at, is how does BPM work in with our overall strategy?
It is definitely a strategic tool because it helps identify synergies and redundancies across the enterprise. Having said that, It is an effective strategic tool depending on how it's been set up and implemented, because doing it successfully at an enterprise level needs like a central team that's overseeing everything. And that can be a big investment, because to be able to do it at that level, especially for a really, really big organization, you almost need a system onboarded and set up properly to be able to do that.
Right.
Which is why organizations are most comfortable to start it to kind of target the low-hanging fruit, so to speak.
Yes.
So they start small, the small projects, baby steps. Let's map the process for this little bit. And I guess if once you reap the benefits from that, it makes a case for a bigger investment down the track.
Yeah. And I guess that's the big thing, is they want to know what the benefit is, what's the return on investment, where's the value going to come from. And so if I'd imagine that they would start on a smaller scale, the senior management would look at the value that's coming out of that before determining, okay, do we take this enterprise wide now?
Correct. Right.
So looking at the current climate, obviously we're working from home, we're doing this interview from our homes, and it's much like the rest of the country. A lot of organizations have their employees working from home, because currently we're in the middle of just in case someone's listening to this in 6 months or 12 months time, and hopefully we're out of lockdown, but currently we're sitting in lockdown with the whole coronavirus COVID-19 situation. How has that impacted businesses, and especially if you could tie that into business process management, and how that can be a useful or valuable tool in the climate that's happening right now? I mean, there are some organizations that are really struggling. There are some organizations that are shutting down, and at the same time, there are organizations that are thriving out there because of the current climate is just working in their favor. So talk to us a bit about how BPM can support and add value in this current time.
I'll speak with an example. I think that's the best way to sort of resonate with the current situation.
Definitely,
yeah. Let's take, we have a lot of, the contact centers have shut down in the offshore setups. You have India, Philippines, or where have you. Everybody has been mandated to work from home, and they do not have the facility to be able to provide the same service from home, which has greatly impacted the contact centers and the phone call lines where customers need to be serviced in Australia. So there has been a push to ramp up and, hire casual staff and local staff to keep things chugging along and running. You have Telstra doing that. You have other companies doing that. So what's happening is you have all these people who may not have any contact center background joining these organizations. For those people who have been working in this environment and now working from home, they know exactly what to do. They can keep getting on with their day-to-day work. That's right. No problems at all. But in an instance like that, where you are suddenly, your business continuity plan is to ramp up with local staff who have no knowledge whatsoever, having that visibility of how things are done and in what sequence and who does what written down somewhere, so you can almost make it a part of an onboarding pack, would have been very handy. Right. So you just have a new person joining, you give them a brief introduction so that that onboarding pack makes sense to them, and you give them the process. Everybody who's coming on board is looking at the same process and is doing exactly the same thing. So your customer experience will not be impacted as much because of these casual staff who are joining ad hoc at the last minute. Yeah. So that's an example of how having processes mapped and documented and being kept up to date would have been very, very helpful. Having it mapped and leaving it there is not enough, because companies evolve and move very fast. Things change. Certain products go out of service, new ones are introduced. What are the processes to service those products for the company? You need to keep them up to date. And the day-to-day management is just as important.
Great. And I guess that's something I've heard actually, is that an objection or maybe some resistance is like, oh yeah, we've documented our processes before, and they just sit there collecting dust, whether it's in a work procedure or work manual or something like that. So I guess they're questioning the value of it. Like everyone knows it in their head, but it's documented, but it's just sitting there. That was a waste of time and resources. But let's touch on the importance or the value on making that continuous improvement, whether it's incremental or whether it's a radical innovation where you're taking a 13-day process and cutting it down to something that takes 3 hours. That can save a considerable amount of time and resources. Talk to us a bit about the value in that ongoing monitoring, analysing, improving, optimising processes.
Sure. First of all, I'd like to call out that radical innovation doesn't work everywhere. While it sounds like a great buzzword, there is a place for it. So it works very well in knowledge-based and software kind of setups, but in the more construction kind of setups or manufacturing setups, the cost of an experiment gone south can be quite prohibitive. So it's not a matter of fixing a bug, deploying it, and fixing it in the production environment. If you have built something wrong, you have to demolish it, and that's more expensive, so to speak.
Right.
So incremental innovation has its place, and radical innovation has its place. So as for the people's concern about processes gathering dust, that's again another thing where it comes down to how much value the organization places on it. So if you have given a green light to a new project, you must almost have a checklist of what are the sets of project management documentation that need to happen, as does in Prince too. You have stage gates and you have documents that you need to furnish. You almost need to add the process element in there to make sure that the project team has gone and revisited existing processes pertaining to this new change. If there are no new existing ones, then create new processes and make sure it dovetails properly with the existing enterprise processes. So it can be addressed, but there needs to be a process to maintain that the processes are up to date. Coming back to radical and incremental innovation, I'll take a simple example of Westfield, right? It's a commercial space. It specializes in commercial spaces. And it has a marketing team, a design team, a development team, construction team, the whole gamut. Yeah. Now, within Westfield, their marketing team and design team would be employing radical innovation. With this whole brick and mortar concept going a little out of date with the advent of online e-commerce, online businesses where people can sit at home, make a payment, and things get delivered at the doorstep. They don't have to go and worry about parking and all the crowd and deal with other people. It's becoming an outdated concept. So if you notice the new Westfield upgrades that are happening around the city, they are geared towards experiences where you have to physically go into the shopping centers. The eating precincts make sure that there is space for children to play. So if mom and dad are over it, they can go and, have a beer while watching the kid play on the grass.
Right.
So that's an example of an innovation and the importance of it. So instead of going out of date and becoming irrelevant, you almost have to keep moving forward and find innovative ways to stay relevant. Yeah. And it could be a concept. It doesn't have to be a product. It can even be a concept.
Right.
Another example of innovation was improvement, I would say, in process improvement. So they went for the ticketless parking system. When you go ticketless, what it means is you have fewer people losing tickets who then need to call people who then need to help them, right? So now they have fewer people needing to service people for lost tickets. And you can redirect those resources elsewhere.
Yes.
That real tangible benefit of making an improvement in your process. So all you have to do is you have to go to the kiosk and enter your rego. and you know if you need to pay anything or not, you know. So
Yeah.
that was pretty clever. So that's another example of how businesses need to innovate to maintain the edge.
Great, great. And now let's look at that from a, like, I guess from an enterprise-wide view. Looking at the matrix view, obviously, I guess traditionally organizations have looked at the org chart in a very hierarchical view. But what BPM does, and then process management, it really does that, has that cross-functional overview linking between the different departments. So obviously it's not an easy thing to just achieve. It's not something that you can flick a switch and all of a sudden tomorrow we've got that that perspective. But talk about, I guess, is that matrix worth the effort?
So from a cross-functional point of view, I'm going to say we are talking about skills, people skills. So it's more of a view of skills embedded in various parts of the business rather than the reporting lines. So yes, I think that would be fantastic, but again, that will be a huge change management exercise because what you're effectively doing then is pushing people out of a state of inertia where they're comfortable with being at that desk, working with the people they are working with all the time.
Yeah.
But if it can be pulled off successfully, it could foster a secondment culture where similar skill sets move around to different parts of the business.
Right.
Foster collaboration. You'll get to meet people that you normally wouldn't, and you would learn things that you wouldn't. You could also cross-pollinate good ideas, and you could pick up on things that you like and take it back to where you came from. So it'll almost create a mini environment of continuous improvement while driving a sense of ownership because it's now their baby.
Right, right, right.
So
and talking about, I guess with processes, obviously it's something that needs to be governed. One could say, but obviously there's, I guess, with the agile mindset and thinking, making changes quickly and moving quickly, with process governance, I guess talk to us about, I guess, that control versus liberty debate. Like obviously not wanting to slow things down, but then obviously the importance of having that governance over the processes to make sure that the checks and balances are in place, that we're actually putting out the right processes, that the right people are getting these processes and effectively completing their tasks.
Sure. So process governance should provide liberty to be able to react to business changes and evolving landscapes, but it also should have controls to be able to measure and make sure the right KPIs are placed to make sure we are measuring if they're successful or not.
Right.
Say, for instance, you have a steering committee, you have a good governance framework, and you have a steering committee that you meet with at whatever agreed frequency. That steering committee would have a high level visibility of the health of the different businesses and how they're going. So they should have the liberty to make a change in decision that now we're going to stop the process improvement activity in this line of business and focus on this because they are doing all right now and this needs some work. So that's where the liberty comes in. But once there is an agreement on the area or the specific processes that need work, the control needs to come into picture where you agree up front what success looks like. Otherwise, there's no way to know whether you have made any improvements or any change or any difference with all that effort that you're going to put in.
Yeah.
So liberty at one stage, but also control at one stage. Maintaining that flexibility is also important, but not being too flexible where everybody's running amok. Great.
And let's talk about the agile mindset there. I mentioned that just before, talking about there are some organizations that I've been talking with that their focus has really been on adopting that agile methodology, and they haven't they're not doing it in conjunction with managing their processes. They don't have their processes documented, yet they're going full steam ahead with this agile mindset with a number of agile trains. Talk to us a little bit about how agile and process does and should and or whether it works together, and if it does, how does it work together?
Agile, in my experience, has been technology in the technology delivery space, right? Technology is generally, I wouldn't say only, and a means to an end to provide a solution to the business.
Right.
It helps them with the tools to be able to do a certain piece of work. So let's take banking, for instance. Yes, banking has its processes. You have the frontline staff, say you have a loan application process and what have you. Now, that's a heavily regulated environment, and they have certain steps that they need to follow. Now, the technology component, you may be doing a banking platform upgrade, which will impact the system in which the loans approval process is done. But your processes for approving the loan is not changing, just the system's changing.
Right.
So your tool is changing, but the processes aren't. So at the end of the day, the tools and the technology have to be very, very mindful of what they're doing and how they're doing, which would come from the business processes. So they're very much meant to work together. So ideally, what's meant to happen is there needs to be a traceability between a mapped business process and what part of the process is a technology solution delivering, right? And yes, you can go agile with that solution and go right ahead, but they're not mutually exclusive. They're meant to work together in conjunction with each other.
Right.
Does that answer the question? Yeah,
absolutely. So with BPM, is it, you've obviously got the IT department. Some organizations, they look at BPM as it's for the IT team, and for others it's no, that's part of the business team. The business team should care. Talk to us a bit about how BPM is for both, and how it actually helps those two work together.
So yes, that's actually a great segue to, that's pretty much what I said in the previous answer is, it's a bit of both. So it doesn't matter where it sits. The end result is the same, right?
Yeah.
So if it makes the business more comfortable to have it sit within the business, all well and good, but that should inform the acquisition of whatever solution it's going to be.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, it's the technology that needs to solve whatever business problem is there. That needs to be solved, and we need to make sure that it's not the other way around, where we look at a fancy technology and we feel like that's a right fit and we have introduced it into the organization, but now we're trying to somehow change business processes to fit the technology. Right. So
yeah, no, that's good. So for someone that's listening right now, obviously it's we can only cover so much in a 30-minute interview. And we're just scraping the surface of a number of different topics. But I guess for someone that maybe they're listening and they're gleaning a lot from what you're saying, but they do want to learn more, and they want to, I guess maybe they've been put in that position of responsibility in their organization to, I guess, pioneer a BPM framework or something like that. But maybe they've been thrown into the role and they actually don't have much qualification or background. What direction would you point them in? Where can they, I guess, learn more about it, understand more about it, and know the right people? Who do I talk to?
BPMN notation is a very good start. But I would really suggest to keep it very simple and clean, because it has a lot of symbols. And at the end of the day, if a layman cannot pick it up and read and understand what it's conveying, it defeats the purpose. So a really, really lean version of BPMN is a very good start in Visio, because not all organizations invest directly in a big and fancy BPM framework. That's a very good starting point. Understand a few of the simple Six Sigma concepts like Kaizen, Gemba. You know, if you want to understand a process, you have to go on the shop floor and experience it if possible. That's the best way to understand the pain points and actually make a difference. Kaizen is your continuous improvement. Biggest tool is listening. listening what the people are saying and absorbing every little detail of the business and making friends.
Yep.
So I think it's very important to get out of your desk, walk around, introduce yourself to people, even though it may seem like they have nothing to do with the role that you're in. Because you just never know what piece of intelligence you can gather from which person and how they can help you.
Yeah, right. And would you say there that you're talking about it needs to be simple, it needs to be easy for people to pick up, because obviously it's not just for the IT people,
Right.
it's not just for the business process owners, it's for everyone. Everyone needs to be able to pick it up and understand it. Talk to us a little bit about, like, obviously you talked about a simple version of BPMN. Talk to us a bit about getting that enterprise-wide adoption, because I think sometimes that's where an organisation may fall flat with their venturing down that sort of BPM framework or path, is that they can get the IT people on board, but then how do we get the whole enterprise on board to be using, whether it's a software or a solution, but how can we get everyone using these documented processes effectively so that they can pick it up and they don't need to pick up another 100-page PDF to understand how to
Yes.
compute the processes.
I actually, I quite liked what they had put, what they were trying to achieve when I was at Telstra. I'll touch a little on it. So
Great.
they had a centralized process center of excellence based out of Melbourne, and they had satellite teams distributed across the country, and I was a part of the satellite team. But what the process center of excellence did is they had these rigorous quality checks and governance frameworks in place. And by the time I had joined the team, they had mapped a fair few processes using a tool called CaseWise.
Right.
So it was possible because it was systemized. It's a pretty big undertaking. Telstra is a behemoth. What they had done is they had mapped the processes and they used the individual tasks underpinning the processes as a reusable object. So they had a repository and they had very strict naming conventions and numbering conventions. So when you follow all those rules and you're trying to create something new, you automatically know if you're duplicating something and if there's something you can leverage.
Right.
That is the key to not going into silos and doing your own thing, where people land up creating the same thing with just different naming conventions, but they're actually doing the same thing.
Right.
So the key to success for BPM in a nutshell is having a central team, and before getting into any of it, having very, very well-defined structures around how the processes will be named, how will they be numbered, what are the different business areas, who are your primary process owners, having RACI matrices, having a stakeholder matrix, having executive buy-in, because they are going to help you on the change management journey. And this all sounds very high level, but the beauty of it all was they had actually reusable tasks, and under each tasks, they had work procedures. A step-by-step guide for the frontline staff. It may be a contact center person on the phone trying to service another customer who's in a rush.
Yeah.
And they pretty much know, because the frontline staff knows that the processes are named in a certain format, they know exactly how to search for them.
Right.
So while they're on a call, they can quickly search for the process, go into a specific task that they are after, and then immediately they're presented with an HTML format set of instructions.
Great.
On what they need to do in the system to be able to perform that action.
Yeah.
So it was really quite beautiful, where it was quite well managed and it served the customer at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, obviously today we can only, as I mentioned, we can only cover so very little, it feels. But I'm certainly excited to release this interview. I'm sure a lot of people that are listening right now, because we will have launched it when you're hearing this, I'm sure a lot of people you'll be giving them ideas for their own, to take back to their own organisation. I'm hoping that this interview sparks further conversation, and I'm sure that if any of you want to find out or I guess dive into any of these topics to a deeper level, I hope you're okay me saying this, Mitushi, but I'm sure Mitushi would be fine for you to connect with her on LinkedIn and send her a message.
It'd be my pleasure. Yeah.
That sounds great. Well, Mitushi, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me, Daniel. It was really good to have this conversation.